My name is Jeff Halper, and I'm the head of an organization called the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, which is an Israeli organization that's dedicated to finding a just resolution to what's really the Israeli oppression of Palestinians and trying to get to a solution in which everyone can live in this country equally, with equal rights. So we're a movement, not anti-Zionist in the sense that we don't accept that Jews have a place in this country. Of course, Jews do have a very important historical religious link to this country. The problem is that the Zionist movement, when it began in the late 19th century in Europe, decided not to come here and live together with Arabs. Jews had come here for centuries, for millennia, and everybody lived together well. You know, there was never the Holocaust or the Cossack attacks or the Inquisition or persecutions of Jews in the Middle East, especially in Palestine. Everyone lived very well. So the Zionists could have said, we're coming, we want to come back to our home in the land of Israel, but we're willing to live with the Arab population here. We recognize that there are people living here, and let's live together. Instead, they did the opposite, and that's the source of the problem. The Zionists said, no, this country is the land of Israel. It is not Palestine. We have an exclusive right as Jews to come back to our country, and it has to be a Jewish country, and we have to get rid of the Arab population. There is no such thing as a Palestinian. Palestinians have no rights in this country. And that was the beginning of what we call this conflict. You know, and that was true, at the beginning of the 20th century, and it remains true until today. You know, until today, the Israelis are trying to drive the Palestinians out of the country. And that became the root of the problem. So this is not a conflict. That's something that's really important to understand. A conflict is a symmetrical, there's a conflict between two sides, and they get into a fight about something, and then they negotiate and compromise a solution. Zionism adopted, unfortunately, a form of settler colonialism. In other words, like other settler colonial movements in the United States and Canada, South Africa, Algeria, Australia, and so on, the idea was that a European Jewish population would come to Palestine and claim it for themselves and settle it. And settler colonialism means that we take over somebody else's country, we displace them, we take their land, and then we remake the country in our own image. So the very purpose of Zionism was to erase the Palestinian population, erase the Palestinian cultural and religious ties to these countries, and transform an Arab country into a Jewish country. Transform Palestine into Israel. Right? And of course, that set up a kind of a conflict that's irresolvable, because it's not a conflict of sides that can be, if one people that become colonists, which the Zionist Jews were, come in and say, this is our country, we're going to expel everybody else. Well, the colonized people, the indigenous population, the local people can't agree to that. And there's no compromise. What's the compromise? We'll expel half of you. So we're involved in our movement, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, with Palestinians in trying to bring here one democratic state to replace Israel and the occupation with one democratic state of equal rights for everyone. And that's the only way in which Jews can live here as Jews, as Israelis. They can have their national identity. They can be Zionists. They'll speak Hebrew. You'll still have the Hebrew University. You'll still have Hebrew literature, Hebrew media, Hebrew, but they're living here in a country together with the Palestinian Arab population, whose refugees also return. In other words, the only solution to colonization is decolonization, creating something new. You can't compromise. It isn't like a conflict where you can negotiate, because to really have equal relations between all the people and a genuine peace and so on, you have to have decolonization. So that's what we're engaged in. We accept, I came here from the United States more than 50 years ago. So in a way, I'm a settler as well. So I accept, obviously, I came here, my family is here. There is a Jewish connection to the country. By calling Israelis settler colonists doesn't mean there isn't a Jewish connection to this country. There is. But you cannot come into Palestine, even with all your historical and religious ties, and displace, dispossess, expel another people. There's no justification for that, not religiously, not in terms of justice or anything else. So now that we're here, and we've created this colonial entity that's called Israel, that's expanded into the West Bank, it now controls all of historic Palestine, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, right? That's in which Jews have all the rights. It's a Jewish country, and Palestinians are either disappeared or expelled or confined to little enclaves in an apartheid regime that's very much like South Africa. That cannot be. The two-state solution that everybody talks about never was, because Zionism always aspired to control all of the land of Israel, to the Jordan River. It would never agree. Israel today would never agree to a genuine Palestinian state that had territorial contiguity, that was sovereign, that was economically viable. They would never agree to that. All Israelis will agree to, if we can't get rid of the Palestinians, is to confine them to little islands in a kind of a South African Bantustan. That's unacceptable. So the idea of colonization, the idea that this is exclusively a Jewish country and we're going to erase the Palestinians, the idea of expelling or killing or even getting into genocide with Palestinians, or the idea of setting up a new Jewish apartheid regime, all those are unacceptable to us. And therefore, we're fighting for one democratic state for everyone living here. ICAHD, we call our group, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, began when the Oslo peace process was in a state of collapse. Netanyahu was elected in 1996 against the Oslo peace process. And in 1997, we saw that the occupation was getting stronger and stronger. The peace process was over. And so we decided to organize to try to begin to resist again the occupation. A number of Israeli peace organizations came together. We weren't exactly sure what to focus on in terms of going back to resist the occupation. So we went out to talk to our Palestinian partners, and they suggested we focus on the issue of house demolitions. We didn't know very much about that issue, actually, but it's one of the most painful issues for Palestinians. And that is that Israel does not allow, since 1967, Palestinians to build new homes on their own land, in the West Bank, in Gaza, but also inside Israel. We can't forget that inside Israel, the Palestinians went through a Nakba in 1948. They had 90% of the lands were already taken. They're concentrated in a few villages. Their lands have been taken away, and they suffer from house demolitions. Their position, even though they're citizens of Israel, is just a little bit better than those of the occupied territory. And so Israel has frozen Palestinian building in 1967. Well, I have children, I have grandchildren, I have land, I want to expand my house, I want my son to be able to build a house. I can't do it. So what happens is Palestinians are forced to build homes. It's a fundamental human right to have a home. Palestinians are forced to build homes without a building permit. And the Israeli army comes in and demolishes their homes. Israel has demolished about 60,000 Palestinian homes just in the occupied territories, in Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank since 1967. But don't forget, since October 7th, in Gaza, Israel has now demolished another 250 to 300,000 homes in Gaza. So what we discovered over the years was house demolitions was the essence of the issue. Because if you destroy someone's home, you say to them, you have no place in this country. You cannot live here because you can't live without a home, right? And get out. That's really the message of house demolitions, and we see it in Gaza, where Gaza has been left uninhabitable for Palestinians, and now they're talking about moving them out of Gaza completely, which is a forcible displacement, which is against international law. But that's what Israel wants for all the Palestinians, is to be forcibly displaced to other countries so that this can become an exclusively Jewish state. That cannot be. Not in terms of justice, not in terms of the Jewish religion, not in terms of human rights, international law, and that's what we're trying to fight. So, again, the only way out is to decolonize Israel. And that means to replace Israel and the occupation with one state. This is one country. The Palestinians call it Palestine, between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. Jews call it the land of Israel. Whatever you call it, both people see this as one country. Okay, let's have one country, right, over, all of historic Palestine, the land of Israel. Equal rights for everyone, right? Palestinian refugees return. And then we have a state that's basically binational. In other words, Israeli Jews can remain Israeli Jews, they can remain settlers, they can remain Zionists, they can have their Hebrew culture, the Hebrew language. All of that remains, but within the framework of one democratic state for everyone. And Palestinians can remain Palestinians. They can have their culture, they can have their heritage, they have their own universities, their own literature, their own religion, and so on. That's fine within the framework of one democratic state. So it's really a just solution. It's a win-win for everyone. But it's not Israel in the sense that it's not run by Israelis exclusively for Israeli Jews against Palestinians. But it's also not a Palestinian state. They can do the opposite. They can oppress Jews. It's a state, a democratic state that's inclusive of everyone. And we believe that that is the only way out of this terrible situation that we're in.